Welcome to another episode of The Playful Lens. I'm Helena from Experiential Wellbeing.
And I'm Gillian, the glitter and coffee teacher.
In this inspiring episode, we chat with the wonderful Dr. Mary O'Kane. Mary talks to us about the role that risky play plays in supporting our children's overall emotional development. She talks about the increase in mental health struggles that our children are having and looks at how the lack of play or reduced play may be impacting that. It also gives lots of invaluable information about smartphones and technology on our children's development. So this is an episode you're really not going to want to miss.
Welcome to the Playful Lens, and on this episode we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Mary O'Kane.
Much for having me.
You are very welcome, and Mary, we are delighted to have you on the Playful Lens. You have so much to offer. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, well, I should tell them. So I am a lecturer primarily. I seem to wear a lot of hats at the moment, but I lecture in psychology and early ed. I lecture in both. So I lectured in Maynooth for years, but I lecture now at the Open University. And so my students are either doing a psychology degree, or a lot of my early ed students are coming back to education. So a lot of my psychology students are younger. They're starting out. And the early ed students are usually really sort of very experienced early ed practitioners who've thought, you know what, I'm going to go back and do my degree. So I do the two areas. And my psychology is child psychology, which I always laugh. When I started lecturing, psychology was child psychology was birthed to 18, but not anymore. We're birthed to 25 now in my psychology. And funny, the Open University are quite progressive. A lot of child psychology modules still stop at 18, but because of the teenage brain, we go on to 25. So they're the two areas I lecture in. And the whole play thing, so I think I might come at play from a slightly different perspective to a lot of your guests, because I would have started, particularly with the early ed, focusing on well-being. So I don't lecture on things like management or whatever. Everything I lecture on transitions, play, imagination, well-being. It's all those types of modules. So I was really, really focused on well-being for years, but then my lecturing took a shift and well-being went into decline, even with the younger children. So I ended up really shifting and looking at mental health struggles and looking at anxiety and looking at the decline, basically, in well-being. So I sort of came around full circle to looking at how our little ones, but right up to our teens, are really, really struggling with their mental health. And we absolutely know they are. And I suppose really what I want to talk about is how that brought me full circle back to play, because it was this focus on what is happening here that I suppose I started with the teenagers, that their mental health is in such decline. What's contributing to that? And it it led me down the road to phones and to social media, but right back around to play, because I really believe the decline in teenage mental health isn't starting when they're teenagers. We kind of assume it is. "Oh, what's happening to them when they hit 13?" But no, it's happening way earlier. And that has become a huge focus for me in looking at the early years.
Yeah, we very easily forget that we're playing the long game
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
working with children and parenting. So, Mary, you said you're coming at it from a different angle, which sounds really interesting. So, we want you to imagine that you have the ears now of all the parents, the teachers, school leaders, the SNAs in our schools, anyone working with children, in fact. What would you really, really like them all to know about play?
Well, Helena, and it's funny, the long game, those words, that's actually really important, because I say that even to my early ed students. I say to them, when you think about what you're doing here, very often they think about the transition to primary school as being their goal. I want to really work on these children's development, their social and emotional development, their language, their independence, everything. And their focus is the transition to school. And I'm saying to them, you need to reframe that and think, no, What you're doing is laying the foundation for adulthood. So if you're a primary school teacher, if you're the parent of a primary school child, what you're doing from junior infants up is laying the foundation from adulthood. So when I'm looking at research on our teenagers, we know they are struggling. So if I can just give you an example. So there was a big research project before COVID. Guys, I would love to see it done again. But it was a lady called Mary Cannon. So she's Professor, I should call her Professor Mary Cannon. She is with the College of Surgeons. So she did this research prior to COVID. And the stats are, people throw them around a lot, but they're really important. She found by the age of 13, 1 in 3 of our children in Ireland has experienced a mental health difficulty. That's like anxiety is a big one, it's the biggest one. By 24, she found half of them had. So we know that in Ireland, teenagers and young adults are really struggling. That was prior to COVID. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm sure teachers sitting listening to this are all thinking, if I look at my classroom so many years before COVID to now, the changes that we're seeing in the education system, I would love them to go back and revisit that research. But she was looking at generally speaking, their mental health. And then probably a lot of the teachers listening will be familiar with the My World surveys. So there was a My World survey conducted in 2012, My World 2 in 2019. Again, Irish research looking at our teenagers and young adults' mental health. And again, from 2012 to 2019, there was this decline. We can see it. And I like to tell parents about this because sometimes parents or even teachers might think, oh, a lot of the research on decline is American or it's from the UK, but this isn't. And this is really valid Irish research. So we know that something is going on. That My World 2 survey, so it's asking about their world. And the kids are saying their mental health is declining. Like we can see that from 2012 to 2019. But they're talking about anxiety. They're talking about depression. They're talking about what it feels like to live in their world. And one of the things I think it's a really important message that they came back with really resonated with me in terms of my lecturing. So in my lecturing, I'm always talking about attachment theory. I'm talking about one good adult. We're always getting this message across. Well, those teens and one adult, young adults, when they were asked, hey, so you're telling us about your anxiety, you're telling us about your depression, what helps? They came back and it was us. It was one good adult, 15,450 of them. So a nice big sample. But they came back and they said, it is that person. They might have said mum, dad, teacher. They might have said sibling, Auntie Jane, my granny. But whoever it was, they came back and they said, what makes a difference to us is having one good adult. And even more importantly, I'm always talking about perfection. And our parents think they have to be perfect. These kids didn't need perfection. They said what mattered to them was having somebody who believed in them, who wanted to help them. And I just think that's like absolutely mind blowing. And for me, then, that really got me researching and looking into what's going wrong and
Mhm.
how can we help. And the two major things are social media or smartphones and play. The two things we know that have changed. Um, People usually start with the smartphones. They like to talk about that. But if you don't mind, if I can step back a little bit and talk about play. No, hold on. I'll mention the smartphones first. There was a huge piece of research in America, put this decline down to smartphones. Okay, so we knew that. But within that research, and I will come back to that, within that research, there were a few things identified that kids were really struggling with. Now, this research was huge. 11 million teenagers and young adults were involved in this. It was Jean Twenge. She's the University of San Diego. She wrote a wonderful book called iGen, which is a book worth looking at. And many of the teachers may have heard of it before. But there were a few things in her research, and it was a huge research study, but that really resonated with me. And two of them they were changes she was finding over time. So she found mental health was absolutely in decline. You can see her graphs in the book, like they're like
Oh.
go down, mental health declining. But these two things that were kind of linked to it. And one was locus of control. Now, if you're a parent listening, you might be thinking, There's that. Basically, it means, do I feel I can control my world? So we talk about locus of control being internal or external. And what she found was before this decline, she looked at 5 decades of research from these 11 million kids. So 5 decades ago, if we talk about having quite an internal locus of control, that means I believe when something goes wrong, I can control my world. Like I can handle it, I can figure it out, I can. It's kind of a little bit linked to resilience. So she found the kids back then had a really internal locus of control. When something went wrong, they believed they could change it. Wow. The kids, the modern day kids, so she's looking about 2012 on, it had done a U turn. These kids were completely external. So when something goes wrong, they're like, ah, I need my mom. I need, who's going to rescue me? What am I going to do? Like they just didn't know what to do. And that's huge. Not feeling in control of your world is huge. Now, she's blaming it on social media, but I'm thinking, okay, let's step back a bit. But the second thing she found was intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is I'm doing something for me. So the teachers listening to this, the parents listening to this are intrinsically motivated. They're thinking, I want to be a better teacher. I want to be a better parent. I want to learn something that will help my family or my children in my classroom who are still your family. But you know what I mean? That's what it's intrinsically motivated. Extrinsically motivated is what I call the Kardashian effect. It's I'm doing everything for likes, for recognition, for money, for whatever. But this research found the same. Kids back in the day were intrinsically motivated. Whoa. I remember this statistic in my head. It was 85% back in the day were really intrinsically motivated, and it had gone to 85 being extrinsically. So our teens now, they're not valuing themselves. They're not doing things for themselves. Everything is about impressing the group and impressing the crowd, and feeling judged. It's all this external stuff. So she put this all down to social media. But guys, think about it. These kids didn't just suddenly change when they got a phone in their hands or when they got social media. Researchers like Peter Gray, which I'm sure your teachers will be so familiar with, so many researchers start to come back and say, whoa, 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 whoa. Something's happening way before that. It's happening from when they're little. And guys, it's play. Our attitude to play has changed. I mean, guys, you know this as well as I do. And it seems to be having a huge impact on our kids.
Yeah.
Massive impact. And Adele Lawler, we had her on recently as
Oh,
well.
yeah?
Yeah, she said that phrase like our elders, our
Hmm.
grandparents and our great grandparents and our parents were so wise because they had the remedy to all of
Yeah,
this when they
yeah.
said, will you ever go out and play? It's
That's it.
that simple.
Get out on the road. Get out on the road and play. But
Yeah,
that's what it was. And that's
yeah,
it, Lena. We've changed. And when I say play, I don't mean that our children are choosing to play differently. I mean, we
Yeah.
are parenting so differently. We are, and I blame my generation. We were the play date generation. Exactly what you said, Lena. So my grandparents' generation, my mum's generation, get out on the road and play. We were bored. We grew up being bored. In the summer holidays, sure, if you came in and said, I'm bored, Mum, your mother would look at you like you'd lost your mind. Go call for somebody. Get out on the road like that. You were left to your own devices. And those generations parented so differently. They gave their children autonomy. We were bored as kids, and we now know that boredom activates centers in the brain that literally start us thinking more imaginatively, that we start problem solving when we are bored. But parenting today has changed so much. And can I just say something in defense of parents? Because, oh my gosh, I'm speaking to parents every day of the week, and I am this parent. I mean, I'm the play date parent, absolutely. Oh my gosh, my eldest would have gone on a play date with Jack the Ripper. She was on a play date with every child in her class, and I was there along with her, hovering, because we all hover all the time. But I am absolutely have been that parent, and I have to make myself not be. But I think so. My mum's generation and her mum's generation believed their children were safe, and they said, "Get out on the road, off you go to play." You know, and they thought they were safe. Now, by allowing us that freedom, we grew very strong and resilient. You know, when I think to my childhood, we had a caravan down in Arklow when we were kids. My mum's family, all the aunties and uncles, we were all in this one caravan park in Arklow. You got up in the morning and you went and you knocked on the caravan beside you, who's coming out? And nobody asked their parents, could we get, they went out and off they went, and we came back when we were hungry, and we were on mixed age trips. You were told, bring your little brother with you. You didn't want to bring your little brother with you, but you had to bring him. And off we went. So we were learning from each other. We had freedom. We had autonomy. We learned when to step up. We learned when to back away. We learned how to problem solve. We learned how to negotiate. All this stuff that we learned in that mixed age group, free play. Then our parents probably realized that within that freedom, children were harmed. And it was my generation. I mean, I hold my hand up. It was us who became so scared, and naturally, but we became so scared that we overprotect. I often say we're the Madeline McCann generation. So my youngest would have been the same age as Madeline McCann. So before, three kids, girl, boy, girl, and from my eldest, we were the playdate generation. We monitored our children's play because that was being a good parent. That's what good parents did. You hovered everywhere and you were invited to play dates. You never left your child in somebody else's home, even if you got to know them. No, we stayed and we hovered. And I was just saying this to somebody the other day. You'd all be sitting having a coffee and you'd hear a blood-curdling scream from the garden, and we'd all jump up and we'd run out, and we would be secretly hoping ours was the child bleeding and not the one who caused the incident, because then you were a bad parent. But we ran out and we monitored and we hovered and we controlled. Even in early ed, I have never lectured in sort of conflict resolution in early ed. We have modules on it because these children cannot be trusted to resolve conflict themselves. Oh no, we need to hover, we need to control. And you, what would you like to say to him? And what would you like to say to her? So we became so controlling. And then we wondered why our children didn't become resilient, because we jumped in, we rescued them, we saved them, we hovered. You're the lawnmower and helicopter parenting. And I always say, I was both. You know, I was the lawnmower with the helicopter rotor going over me. I mean, but it was nearly, we all were. And I think it's only years later we realized, oh my gosh, the harm we had actually done to our children. And I mean, if any parent is listening and they're thinking, oh, my child has anxiety and it's my fault. No, we all did it. And society was telling us that we had to do this to be a good parent. You know, we were reading about it in magazines. We were on the internet. We were hearing all this stuff. We had to do this to be a good parent. But now we're realizing that actually we need to start to learn to step back from our children because we weren't doing them any favors.
Mary, what advice would you give to yourself if you could go back in time? Bearing in mind you're holding this fear as well, because
Yeah.
you're afraid my child might be harmed
Mhm.
if I'm not. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, that's such an interesting one. And I'm so glad you mentioned the fear, because parents today are still feeling it. They are still feeling the fear. You know, I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to myself is trust your instincts and don't be as impacted by judgment. I think one of the things my mum's generation and her mum's generation didn't have was judgment. Parents today feel judged in everything they do, and they are. We are being judged. And can I just say, we are doing it to each other. We are very judgmental. Like, yeah, at the school gate, we can be quite judgmental of each other. We're kind of looking at, do you see her rolling in at this hour? And your little fella has been standing there for the last 10 minutes. Look at her. She rolls in now. She was in no hurry today, was she? She was probably having coffee earlier. We do these things. You know what? Her little fella was at no harm standing, playing with his friend at the school gate for those 10 minutes. We can be so judgmental. And I would say to myself back then, I think judgment was part of it. We were so aware of being judged. And the fear, we now know that we overestimate the risks in the world and we underestimate our children's ability to cope. Guys, your child is much more likely to suffer an injury in organized sports than they are in free play, in adventurous play, in outdoor play, in risky play. But does our brain register that? No, because those sports are well organized and we have adult supervision, and in our heads, we think, oh, but that's safe. Honestly, that free play, that and risky play, and I know parents hate that hate risky play. I started calling it safe risk taking just to make it sound that little bit better. It doesn't sound quite as bad with safe risk taking. Okay, I think I can cope with that one. It's not as bad. But that risky play, we know now is so good for us. If I can go back to anxiety for a minute, and I think this explains it well. We know what's happening in our children's brains when they're feeling anxious. So the amygdala in the center of the brain, seat of fight or flight, has gone into overdrive. So when our children are feeling anxious, they are sent into this state of fight or flight. Their heart is pounding, their arms feel a bit shaky, they feel a bit wobbly, their breathing changes, they might feel a bit lightheaded. So all that physicality of anxiety is what the child is aware of when this happens. And that's happening for a lot of our children in situations where they're not actually in danger, but it's happening. So think about what happens with safe risk taking, but with the adventurous play, with outdoor play, with that little bit of risk. And risk guys can be going a little bit faster on the swing than they used to, a bit higher. They're on their bike. Come on, let's go a bit faster. Come on, we can go up this hill. Woo, let's go down this fast. That type of risky play. What happens? The same place in their brain. The amygdala goes, don't think I like this very much. This feels a bit risky. Their heart pounds. They feel the adrenaline through their arms. Their breathing changes. It's the exact same physicality. They're having the physicality of anxiety through play. And the brain starts to think, well, this wasn't too bad after all. That was actually fun. Oh my gosh, it was a little bit scary, but it was actually quite exciting at the same time. And they're learning. You know what? We can do hard things. But things can seem a little bit scary, but that doesn't mean I can't do them. They're really learning. Guys, there was a piece of research, the University of Exeter. I could have hugged this woman. Oh, I'm trying to think of her name now, and I can't think of her name, but it was the University of Exeter. If I think of it, I'll name it. But anyway, she did this big piece of research after COVID. So she had sites all around the UK. She'd one in Dublin, actually, and one in Belfast as well. So big piece of research, and she was looking at how children coped with lockdown and generally with COVID. But what she did was she asked the parents, tell me about before COVID, before this ever happened, how outdoor play. How often did your kids get outdoor? Do you encourage outdoor play? What sort of play do you take part in when they're outdoors? How do you feel about risk? How about risky play? How do you encourage this? She went through all the attitude to outdoor play, to risky play, to adventure. Were the parents adventurous? And what she found when she went back and looked at how their children coped with lockdown, with COVID, with being off school, the families who had encouraged risky play, adventurous play, getting their kids outdoors before COVID, their kids coped so much better with lockdown. Why? Because they become resilient. Those kids knew life can get scary. Sometimes my dad is saying to me, come on, we're going to climb up here. Come on, we're going to go a little bit higher. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to do this, but my dad is going, yay, you can do it. And I do it. Or I'm on some logs and my mum is saying, come on, jump. I'm here. I'll catch you. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know if I like this. But they were doing it all before COVID. And their brains have become used to the fact that life can get a little bit scary. But you know what? Even when I get those feelings, when I feel my heart going, when I feel that anxiety through my body, that doesn't mean I can't do this. I could have hugged her when the research came out. I was like, yay, because it was what so many of us have been saying for so long. And she used COVID to really prove it. So everything we're doing in that type of play is preparing them for the challenges of life. It's preparing them to believe in themselves, to be more independent, to be more resilient. I mean, isn't that what we want? So I suppose that has really shown us is that we need to allow our children these adventures. We need to allow them to get out there, take risks, take chances. And sometimes that might go a little bit wrong. They try something and they fall and they scrape their knee, but they're learning to be strong and resilient. They're learning that they feel anxiety in the body, but that doesn't mean fear. I can feel that, but I can still take on a challenge and I can complete it. I can do things. We really want them to know. Guys, I always think about I have two girls and they both did gymnastics. And it's like a risk benefit thing. And I always think of them with gymnastics. So they start doing gymnastics and before they ever get on a beam, they work on the floor and then they work on a really low little beam. At some point, that gymnastics teacher puts up a high beam and your child has to get up on it. And if they're ever going to do a cartwheel on the beam, one day they have to be brave and try it. Could they fall? Yes, they could. So what do? We lay mats to protect them on the ground, but we still encourage them to do the cartwheel because they're learning how strong and capable they are. They're learning, wow, that was hard, but I can do it. So I think we just need to remind ourselves of that if we want our children to find all that bravery that we know they have within them, we have to find our bravery. We have to find it ourselves if we want them to find it as well. You and I were talking earlier about this quote I put up on social media recently, and it was UK. It was a piece of research from the UK that they were talking about how children with broken bones, the number of children in the UK with broken bones has plummeted. Our kids aren't breaking their arms. They're not breaking their legs. They're not spraining their ankles. And not that we want them to be going out and doing that. But why? Why have those numbers fallen so dramatically? Because we're hovering over everything they're doing. But guys, self-harm. Self-harm has gone through the roof. And it's much easier for a doctor to mend a broken bone than it is these children who are really struggling with disordered eating. They're really struggling with anxiety. They're struggling with self harm. They're struggling with suicidal thoughts. And I honestly believe, and I know it's complicated, and we'll come back to the social media piece, but if we start when they're little, if we start when they're young, finding our brave, helping them find their inner bravery, helping them to become resilient, helping them to realize they're strong and capable. I always say to myself, step back from the child. And guys, I should say, I'm saying all this as if Superman Mary Poppins here. No, I do lots of things wrong. Guys, I remember being at, those playgrounds with they're like a wigwam shaped and you climb up on the ropes. I remember being with my kids when they were very young and my husband. I used to take my kids to this playground all the time, and I'd be at the bottom, face with fear, terror written all over it. And my kids would be going to climb, and I'd be like, and my husband would be like, yay, you can go higher. Reach for the next one to my daughter. And I'd be like, I remember him saying to me, Mary, go for a walk. I mean, the message I was giving my children was, I don't believe you're capable. I don't believe you're strong enough to do that. I don't believe you are independent. And he was giving them the message, yay, I believe in you. My fear was overwhelming. So if any parents are listening and you're thinking, but I'm a wuss, so am I. I mean, I know most of us are. But I think we just need to say to ourselves, be brave, or occasionally go for a walk and leave your husband with that thing in the playground. I mean, if you do need to step away, step away. But we need to find our bravery. Another thing, and I think it's a really important message for parents, doing this changes what happens when they get access to social media. So back to that Jean Twenge research. She blamed everything on social media. Okay, no, gosh, I'm paraphrasing the woman there, but she was arguing that social media was the culprit. So her book is iGen. She was talking about iPhones, iPods, iPads, whatever. So she was blaming everything at what happens that age. But really, it's what happens beforehand. And I feel really strongly, overprotect our children in the real world. Then, and I was about to say, but I'll correct myself, I was about to say, but when they make the transition to secondary or at their confirmation, we hand them an iPhone. We're doing that a lot earlier, but we give them access to the online world and we don't protect them. So we're raising a generation who are not resilient. We're giving them access to the world. And then we're shocked when levels of anxiety and levels of depression go through the roof. And I'm not, I don't mean to be really, really critical of parents because I know and I've lived it, but we actually need to step back and question what we're doing. The phone issue, and I know I have a radio show on Dublin City FM, and I've been doing lots of programs about technology and basically the dangers of technology. And I'd interviewed a lady called Monica Rowe. She used work for the ISPCC, and she went into secondary schools giving talks on technology, usually to second years and TYs. And I had heard about her work and I contacted her and she sort of laughed. Well, Mary, I don't go into secondary schools anymore. Far too late. I go into primary schools. She said secondary schools, I mean, what I was saying was far too late, but she goes into primary schools and she talks to the kids about technology. And the first thing she said to me when I naively, because mine are older, mentioned confirmation and mentioned the transition to secondary school, she said, Mary, children are buying iPhones with their communion money. And I was like, whoa. And she was like, oh, yes, my generation, we didn't have that issue. We didn't have to face it. But she said, oh, with their communion money. But really interestingly, she was telling me exercise she does with the kids. So when she starts, she does this all anonymously. And she asks them to just write on pieces of paper how these are like fourth, fifth, sixth class kids. So how long are you allowed on your iPad? Because for some of them, it might be their iPad now. There was really recent research by Cyber Safe Kids. A lot of the work by groups like Smartphone Free Childhood Ireland are doing seems to be working. They're not getting phones quite as young. Just in the last year, 2 years, we're seeing a shift, which is brilliant. But she does this thing with them. How long, whether it's your iPad or your phone, whatever it is, how long are you allowed online? And they write it all down. Then she says to them, how long do you think you should be allowed online? And she said, every parent expects them to go, oh, I should be allowed way more than I'm allowed. She said, the majority is always lower than they are allowed. But these are primary school children, but they already, because they have access to the online world, they already completely anonymously. Should if I asked them in the class, they would tell me the opposite. But should when I asked them to put anonymously on a piece of paper, she said they already know they're spending more time than they should be allowed. I just think we really need to rethink. You know, I don't know if you've heard Jonathan Haidt. I had his book around beside me the other day. A wonderful book, phenomenal book. And I heard him on social media recently talking about the algorithm, okay? And he was saying this was a piece of research. Now, they were looking at girls, but I'm sure it's the same for boys, maybe slightly different focus, but the same for boys. But he was talking about young teenage girls. And he was saying the algorithm is now designed that when they take a selfie, delete, take a selfie, delete, take a selfie, delete, the algorithm registers, okay, selfie, 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 delete. And it is programmed to send them information on dieting, information on makeup, information on beauty products. It is designed to do that. This is not the 28-year-olds and the 25-year-olds. These are the 13, 14, and 15-year-olds. So
God.
as parents, we need to stop and think. And I think, funny, one of the things parents will often say to me is, but they need contact. They need to have contact with their friends. And I mean, I get that. Yes. Oh my gosh. Teenagers, their friendship group, naturally, they're moving their attachments away from the home, from family. Their attachments are shifting into the teenage world. They want to be more independent. I mean, their brain development is screaming at them to do this. It's what they're designed to do, so absolutely. But we think if we give our child a phone, we're giving our child access to their friends and whatever. We are giving the world access to that child. And I think they're hard truths to hear, but I think we really need to be talking about this.
We're so strict on the phones at home. Like our children don't have our phones, they don't have our iPads, they have limited TV time. But my poor older son, they were doing research for a project in school and they had the iPads, and I'm fully like, it's a skill and we all,
Yeah.
screens
Oh,
are
yeah.
part of life. But my husband and I realized maybe we've been a little bit too strict because my poor son was doing a project and he had written his piece on Poland and literally finished with it. And we said, and now what? And he said, but that's where the iPad stuck. because he didn't know to scroll up. He saw this, he researched whatever it was, and he stopped in the middle of a sentence because that's where the iPad stopped. So we kind of thought we actually do need to teach him that little bit of, for research, and you scroll up and but we are so protective around the screens that he didn't know.
Scary.
And he stopped it at there and there. But it's so
Gillian, there's
sad.
something lovely about that though,
It is so, it is.
because
Yeah.
I have my preschool practitioner students will tell me that they're getting preschoolers in and they give them a book and they go like that to the book.
Mary, I had
And
that
they're
today. I had that today in junior infants. I had a child doing this to zoom in and then ask me, "Can I have the books on the iPad?" And I said, "No, we're reading our books today." But it's very sad because you can really see it in junior infants that children haven't been exposed to books. And when they are exposed to books, they expect them to zoom or to swipe. So
it's
on one
really
hand, I
frightening.
feel we've kind of sheltered, and
Yeah,
I fully stand over the fact that we shelter the boys because they don't have our screens.
yeah.
I have a 3-year-old who can order his own dinner in a restaurant because we don't have screens. But,
Yes.
I suppose I do maybe need to teach my older one how to go down and get a little bit more information.
And you see, it is true. I mean, I'm not anti-technology at all, but and I think over COVID also, there was some fantastic stuff in technology when we
Yeah.
were in COVID in terms of connecting with Granny, FaceTime Granny and say hello to her. And I know my son was doing guitar lessons online. And so it's not that technology is dangerous. It's really not. But it's like the difference between eating a salad every day and eating a Big Mac every day. There's a real difference with what's out there. And some of it, there's no denying, some of it is really dangerous. It's funny. I know not everybody else, but I support the ban. They were talking about the under 16s ban.
Yeah.
It
100%.
is absolutely not enough alone. Not at all. I mean, I don't believe a ban is the answer to all our problems in any way, shape, or form, because we really have to educate our kids. But it's important and it would make such a difference to children who maybe aren't being protected. I mean, your son is being protected in many ways, but there's a lot of kids who, as you say, if they're doing this to a book, in junior infants, to actually bring out a ban in social media is a good first step. And funny, I've heard so many parents say, "Oh, but sure, the kids know their way around this and they'll find ways or whatever." Yes, some of them will, but it's shifting perspective. And a lot of kids will accept it, or it's shifting how we view this thing. Because I just think we are leaving our children open to such dangers. And no matter what we say, most of us as parents actually really don't understand technology the way our teenagers do. So we're at a loss. They know more than we do. So we're starting from behind them in some ways. But I definitely think, and as I said, I really feel strongly we need to educate ourselves and educate them. Funny, I had another psychologist on the radio show, Aisling O'Connor, up in Sligo. You may know her. And I was saying to Aisling, of course, in my view, the most important thing is to keep phones out of the bedrooms. And I was lucky. So my children are older now, and my eldest is 28, they're 28 to 22. So phones were only really coming on board. But I remember my husband had made a docking station when they were old enough for phones in our kitchen. And he did it because he had heard about phones being left on sofas and things or in beds and being a fire risk. So we had a docking station. Nobody had their phone including me. Nobody had their phone in the bedroom overnight. They would always had to be when they lived at home. They had to be in the kitchen and they could charge there overnight. And I was saying to Aisling, no phones in bedrooms is so important. And she was saying, "Oh, Mary, no phones in any room that you are not a
Yeah.
child." And I'm like, "Oh, tell me more." She was talking about the number of parents who've had, and I mean experiences with primary school children, and they were sitting in the playroom and mum or dad thought they had the iPad or they had the phone and they believed, "Oh, but they're only sitting in the playroom. They're sitting in the other room there. I can hear what's in that room." She said, "No, we need to be so much more aware."
It's such a mess because I heard,
Yeah,
of a school where there was trouble, there was drama between 6 class pupils, online social media. So it was happening outside of school to the extent that the guards were involved. They had to call
yeah.
all the guards to come to speak to the children in the class. And you can see how this is a mess because parents are saying, well, actually, listen, those children are in your care all day in school. You need to be monitoring
Yes,
those relationships, and you teachers and principal and school leaders, the responsibility lies with you in terms of this. The school are saying, absolutely not. This is a parenting issue
yeah,
because this is happening online at home. So you can see all this is happening, but the people who are lost are the children.
Yes.
And it's
yes,
so interesting what you said, that the children themselves are like, I wish it was taken off me. I get that.
yes,
I wish
yes,
the phone was taken off me in the evenings,
Yeah.
just, or
yes,
just, yeah, I would love if somebody else was just in charge of that for me.
yes,
So it makes perfect sense that the children
yes.
are saying, oh,
At that young, and Helena, the older kids, oh my gosh, the research with the teenagers, they are really aware of the harm. They know it. The number of them who say they have become addicted to their phones and they know they have become addicted, the number of, and it was the latest Cyber Safe Kids research, young boys in particular, addicted to pornography. And can I just say one thing? They did not go out seeking it.
Yes.
Parents say, "But my child wouldn't do that." They're not looking for it. It's being sent to them. It's not, you can't assume my child wouldn't. No, your child is innocently being fed this information. But the teenagers are so aware. And again, Alina, it's really interesting, the whole homeschool dichotomy, because I think it's a societal issue.
Yeah.
mm,
I don't have young kids anymore. I have a responsibility here. We have a society a responsibility and I governmental responsibility. I am sorry. I really think our governments, I mean Irish government, but across the world, need to be doing so much more about this. Again, Dr. Richard Hogan, I was speaking at a conference with him last year, and he was telling me that he had set up oh gosh, when you sign your name, what's it called? A petition. He'd set up a petition about trying to calling on the government to call on the tech companies to do something about pornography. He said senior infant age children. He has had parents come and say, my child has been shown pornography by a friend, by whatever might have happened, an older cousin, whatever it might have been. And he was saying, it's right. He said, our children are seeing the most horrific things. He said, parents are so naive. They don't understand the horrific things that their children are seeing. And once it's seen, you can't unsee that. And he had this petition going for the government. And he was saying to me, it, it just didn't get the response and no governmental action. So we as society have a huge responsibility to our children. I honestly think we are going to look back on this one and go, how did we allow this? How were we not all out there screaming about this? And do you know who?
sense. And I've never met a parent who's like, brilliant, I can't wait to
Yeah,
give them the phone in secondary school. They dread it.
yeah,
But yet we do it because it's so, and sometimes I think there are probably worse things than being left out if you're the only kid
yeah.
not on a phone who doesn't have one. But I don't have an answer. And my eldest child will be she's in fifth class at the moment. So like there's no phones, it's not happening yet.
Yeah.
They're in primary school. I don't want to give her a phone in secondary school, but I don't know what to do about it.
Lena, if you look at cybersafekids.ie, they have a page that goes through all the phones that are not smartphone phones
Oh.
or phones where you can give them access to certain apps,
Mhm.
which are apps for connection
Yeah.
rather than giving them access to everything. I mean, for me, for parents, that's a start. Do you know something? If I'm really honest, guys, do you know who's going to change this? And it's not us. So
No, it's
my
them.
eldest is 20. I'm telling you, it's her generation. They are so aware of the harm. And I've heard her say, my children will. Now, she was lucky. I was lucky. She came along ahead of when phones were really coming in. So I don't know when she had a phone, but she was quite old in secondary school at that point. But there wasn't the pressure. The pressure wasn't there. But um, I have heard she has said to me, "No way. she said, oh, when I have children, absolutely no way. That generation, like in Australia, when they put in the ban for the under 16s, and it made me laugh because they did research. And I heard people saying, actually, we've done research with the 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. They are absolutely not in favor of this. Of course they're not. Why are you doing research for that group? You want to do research for the older kids. The older, young adults were saying, bring it in. I wish it had been here when I was that age. So it's that generation. They're not the parents yet.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my generation. It's that age group that got phones, but sort of from 28 down. Oh my gosh, they're aware of the damage. I think if our generation doesn't really figure this out, the generation coming up behind us, that group, they will, because the research with them shows they are really aware of the damage. A lot of them are addicted to their phones. They really struggle to stay away. They wish there was more support. They're very aware of the damage it's done to their mental health. And they were really in favor of bringing in a ban. So I'm hopeful that that generation are going to do better than we're doing, because I don't understand, if I'm really honest, why this campaign isn't exploding or
Digital marketing? Is it
I
the
think so.
neural marketing? Are those tech giants who are bringing out these phones and making millions from it? They have it sussed.
yeah,
They know,
yeah,
as you say, they know how to influence to the
yeah,
extent that as parents you almost feel powerless.
yeah. And they wheel the kids in. But again, isn't it interesting, Alina? You look at Bill Gates, you look at all these big techie guys, they don't give their kids phones. They do not give their kids technology. And there's been so much research on, even I know we know certain names, but generally speaking, in Silicon Valley, the heads of these tech programs, they do not allow their children access to social media in particular, but smartphones, they're not giving them to their kids. They know what they're doing. They're aware of it. And yet the rest of us are, I think we've walked into it quite naively. I
Yeah.
do think the tide is turning though.
And it's the fear. It plays on fear, doesn't it? It's the fear that my child will be left out. That's probably my primary motivation. The fear that she'll be left out. And then I remind myself, if someone is going to be mean to her, they're going to be mean to her, whether on face to face. So it's going to be worse online. So it doesn't even make sense. No.
That lady, Monica Rowe, I interviewed, she said to me, I mentioned that to her, and she said that she would have worked in the ISPCC for years. So she was working on Childline and whatever. And she said, Mary, the children who are going to be left out are going to be left out. Even if you give them their phone, they're going to be left out. She said the reasons for that are quite complex. That's nearly a whole different story. But she said, if you give them a smartphone and if you allow it into their bedroom, you're allowing predators into their bedroom. You're allowing bullies into their bedroom. You're allowing all these people who's the algorithm into the bedroom. I mean, the algorithm is not designed to help them. It's actually designed to harm them because it's only concerned about purchase power. So it's throwing stuff at them to make them feel insecure. So we're allowing all this stuff into their room. So we worry about them being left out. But again, it's like where those fears are mean that we're allowing all this other stuff to harm them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for
Doesn't make
me,
sense.
the fear is, and just to go back to something that you said there about, that the hovering and being that parent who the helicopter parent.
Mhm.
I really try not to be a helicopter parent, and thankfully we're very strong on, we very strong on no phones. But
Yeah,
my 3-year-old's only 3, so that's not an issue, but my 8-year-old, he's not interested. He's never asked for the iPad.
yeah,
And he would rather be outside kicking the ball. He just like, he's out in the rain. It's not raining too much. Can I go out? Oh, he has this lovely free play, and he has this unstructured play and kind of unsupervised
yeah,
play. And Mary, to go back to what you say, actually, when I say that, I feel I'm being going to be judged for being, gosh, she's a terrible parent, isn't she, letting her child out unsupervised?
see,
But it's
Yeah.
so good for him, and I
Yeah.
see the
yeah,
benefits and his language, his skills, his conflict resolution, and it's a mixed group. He's often out with the older boys playing football, and we live in
really
a
good.
gorgeous estate. We know the parents, we know the kids, but my fear is that we have been so strong and we're not giving him a phone, but I don't know who has a phone outside, and I don't know what he's gonna see, and I've said to
Yeah.
him a few times, "What were you doing?" "Oh, I was playing football with the boys." And I've said to him very carefully, "Anybody have a phone out with them?" And he's going, "No."
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for the day he says, "Oh, yeah, so and so had their phone out." And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, what are you going to see on the phone?" Like you said,
Yeah.
there are other children showing something, and that can't be unseen. And I don't want my son to be hurt, but I would much rather see him with a broken leg from falling over the curb with a football than see him
Yeah.
with a broken mind, because of something he's seen. So it's very difficult, even though we do try to protect them so much,
I know.
they can still,
It's really hard. And we do know like sleepovers are
yeah,
one of the big ones.
I won't be doing that.
No, sleepovers, and it's not necessarily that the other child is a bad kid, and there's no such thing as a bad kid,
No, it just
isn't.
comes up on their phone, like you
The
say.
kids who are doing the showing, they've just seen something maybe that shocked them, and they want to shock their friend too. I'd say, "Whoa," and their instinct is to show others. Older kids, and it's not that the older kid is a bad kid, the older kid has seen something and maybe wants to show off. Maybe they're insecure and they're trying to be the big cousin or the big brother or sister or whatever it might be. It's not that kids are intending to hurt each other, but we do know that it is sleepovers and play dates things are some of the places that kids are seeing stuff. This is why when I was talking about being in game for the band, but the band is not enough, we need to talk to our children. We need to educate them. And again, the research, and this is really interesting too. When there was a piece of research, in fact, there's lots of pieces of research asking kids about what would they do if they saw something they know they shouldn't have, or if inappropriate, maybe contact from somebody else, or inappropriate content that they've seen, and what they would do. When they ask kids, "Oh, what should you do?" They know, "Oh, I should tell my mom or my dad or teacher or a grown up, I should tell them." And what would you do? Oh, I wouldn't tell them. No, they know they should. The vast majority will go, "Nope, no way will I tell." Why? They would take my phone away. Parents sometimes use phones as a bargaining tool, or if, I suppose like nearly a timeout sort of consequence. I'm going to remove your phone. And I'm always saying to parents, never, never use the threat of removing the phone, because you need to say to them, if you see anything, if you have contact from somebody, anything that worries you, that scares you, or that you just think your mum would not like this, you can tell me, and I guarantee you I will not take your device away. Actually say it. Say it again and again. Now, maybe you've had the device in the bedroom and you might be removing it from the bedroom, but do not use "I'll take your phone away" as a threat, because your child will not tell you. And we know that they the kids all come back and say, "No, I wouldn't." So it's again, I think the latest cyber safe kids with the younger ones, 50% said they wouldn't, 50 odd. That's really good, because it used to be higher. So maybe that message is getting across to parents as well. We have to tell them, "I will not take that device away," but we need to set boundaries. I mean, I know it sounds very melodramatic to have a family contract, but Gillian, for somebody in your position who's saying, "Okay, I've not allowed phones in," before you allow a phone, sit as a family and work out what's important to me. Even and I'd say to every parent listening, you or your partner, or you might be in a household with your mum, or if you're on your own, sit yourself and make a list of what's important to you. What are my non-negotiables? Work that all out. Think it through. They're not allowed to have the phone in the bedroom. They originally only get up at certain times. Are they only allowed certain apps? Like, work out exactly what's important, but then sit together. And instead of saying, "Okay, here's my rules," you know what your non-negotiables are, sit and have a conversation about how this works, and have family rules. Like, if there's no phones in bedroom, there are no phones in bedroom. Do it yourself. You really have rules that you have a contract, and that's negotiable. Like, as they grow older, that will change. And the rules might be different for a teenager than your younger child. Like, it's all negotiable, but you're introducing it as something that we talk about and we discuss. And that can be helpful as well. Like, but it's not something that they have to try. They'd be, "Oh, I can't tell this." You're trying to open it into something we talk about.
Yeah. My son is great because we are like that. We have no phone at the table. And obviously it's only myself and my
Yeah,
husband who have phones, but it's no phones at the table.
yeah.
And Usheen is great. He'd say, Nana, put your phone away, no phone at the table.
We had that one too. That's good. I love the no phone at the
Yeah, no
table.
phones at the
Yeah,
table. And it doesn't matter if
yeah,
that's a kitchen table or
yeah,
a restaurant, it's
yeah.
no phones at the table.
Yep. If they've no phones at home, they don't do it in the restaurant.
Can I ask you, do you think that with this rise in technology and this rise of the helicopter parent, has there been a societal devaluing of play and the value of, the value that playfulness brings and play for young children, play for the middle children, play for older children? Do we as a society devalue it now?
Do you know, Gillian, I hope that we were, but we're learning. And I think there are quite a few people desperately trying to get the message out. I've been talking about this for years, and I mean, it's not me, it's lots of people have been making this argument for years. I think when that Jean Twenge research came out, and that would have been 2012, when that research came out, the argument about play was being made at the same time. So that's a long time ago. And I think there's a shift. But yes, I think we got carried away. And no, I think it was a fear. It was that fear. Funny, I think our mental health figures for teenagers in Ireland. So that Mary Cannon research I was talking about at the beginning. So the one in three at 13, half of them at 24 have struggled with a mental health difficulty. That research is higher. Those figures are higher than our European and US counterparts. And that always struck me as very strange. And I wonder, now this is just my little theory, what I was saying about our parents' generations. They thought the world was safe. They let us out, play on the road, off you go. And the shock of realizing that their children have been harmed took the legs from under them. And I wonder if in Ireland we always have had huge respect for authority, more so than the US, more so maybe than the UK, that I wonder if we became even more overprotective than our counterparts in America or the UK. And I wonder if that contributed to why our figures in terms of our kids struggling are higher. I mean, you think, hold on, how can this be higher than New York or Chicago or, it makes no sense. And I do wonder if we just became so overprotective. And in that overprotectiveness, our views on play changed. We had to be hovering, we had to be watching, and everything was health and safety, protection. And we just lost sight of what play is. Play wasn't meant to be adult controlled. Play was fun. It was that mixed age groups that we were talking about. It was kids out coming up with crazy ideas. And yes, they fell off rocks and they slid down boundaries and they did all this stuff. The play was fun, but the learning that was generated during all that play, all those skills that made my generation resilient. We became so much more resilient, but because we learned all those skills. And I think, as you say, it became undervalued and maybe misunderstood. Maybe we forgot. Maybe we forgot our childhoods. We forgot what play was like when we were little. But I think now we are going back. We're realizing, my gosh, that was play. And I think research is shouting from the heavens. This is what your child needs. And do it now. Do it when they're little. Do it before they ever get a phone. But it's never too late. If parents are listening and they're thinking, oh, but I have a 9-year-old or an 11-year-old, this is too late for me. I know I'm quite controlling. It's never too late. Step back. Your playfulness is something that can go on through your lifetime. So it's never too late to go hold on with freedom and autonomy and encourage that in your children. And no better way than play. And as I said at the beginning, if with a little one, it's pushing them on the swing a little bit higher. For an older child, yay, on our bike. It can be getting them off, climbing those rock climbing places. Anything that makes that heart go, that is challenging them, is so good for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mary, we could talk to you forever and a day, I have a feeling. But before we ask you for your final key message for our listeners, we might ask you some questions. We might put you on the spot. So, Mary, what was your favourite thing to play with as a child?
Oh, I was thinking about this today, Helena. My first memories of real play, and it says something about my generation, but it was actually in school. And I just have these memories of every day. We played the same thing. There was this huge, big chestnut tree, and we'd get conkers and leaves and sticks, and we played house or home. And I played with maybe 3 or 4 of my good little friends, and it was a huge tree, and there were other kids playing other games, and we went round and back and forth, and we played the same game over and over, and we changed and we adapted depending on what was happening in everybody's lives. It was play therapy. It absolutely was. And it was just, look, we literally worked through what was happening in our lives because all our little dramas in our play, or whatever little drama might have been happening at home, but it was joyful and it was fun. And I mean, I loved it.
We give sessions now on creative visualization for children. You were doing that,
That's what that
Mary.
was.
That's exactly what you were
Yeah,
doing innately, imagining things how you
yeah,
wish they were. Amazing.
yeah.
If you had a stick to play with, Mary, what would it become?
See, a stick can never be one thing. A stick. Oh my god. So a stick could be like a sword, it could be a fishing rod, a stick could be a magic wand. You couldn't ever say one thing for stick because a stick just has endless possibilities for the imagination. So it could be anything, depending on the imagination of whatever child has it in their hand. Sticks are great.
They're the best, aren't they?
Brilliant.
Mary, who nurtured or nurtures your playfulness?
I think in the past, I suppose it's what I've been saying, society nurtured playfulness in my generation because they said, off you go. We weren't bought expensive toys. We weren't given a lot of plastic. We had very little. So we were just told, off you go with each other in your mixed age groups to find whatever you can and you do whatever you want with your play. And I know it sounds crazy that that was nurturing, but it was. It was nurturing because we were given freedom, we were given autonomy, and it didn't have to be expensive. I think today sometimes parents feel this pressure. I have to buy my child the most expensive present. They have to have every toy that their classmates have. Nurturing for our parents was like, no, they couldn't afford to buy us stuff. They didn't even think they had to. It was off you go there and you do whatever. There's plenty of stuff in the garden there and off you go. But it was really, really nurturing. It was.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mary, what is a playful habit that you have never grown out of?
Ooh, now here's a confession. I don't think I'm playful. And I said this recently to somebody. I was talking about losing my playfulness. And this is really bad. And I don't know if other mothers will relate. I feel when I became a mother, I suddenly thought, oh my God, I have to be the sensible one. And luckily, I married a man who is a big kid. So he would have been into the rough and tumble play with the kids and he would have been whatever. I had this idea I had to be the perfect parent. And to be the perfect parent, I had to be the protector and the minder so I knew the schedule. I know what day the dentist is. I know the names of all my kids' teachers. I know all this stuff. And I let him be the fun parent. And I think I kind of lost my playfulness. And I was saying this to somebody recently, saying, God, isn't it awful? Because I think a lot of us as mums do that. We let our partner or husband, whoever be the fun parent, and we become the nag. And I was saying to this person, "Oh, I just think I've lost it completely." And she said to me, it's a friend, and she said to me, "My God, no, Mary, you really haven't lost your playfulness. But in what way am I ever playful?" And she was saying, sense of humor. She said, "You always see the fun in something. She you might not be rough and tumbly, or should no, should that's not who you were, because I was never good at that sort of stuff. And I am the wuss. I mean, I'm an absolute wuss." But she was saying, "I see you with your kids, and my kids are older now. But should I see you with your kids?" And she said, "Or you joke an awful lot. And should you always did that, you would make a laugh of something." And I never laugh at them. And actually, I don't. I don't like people, they play these tricks on kids and put them up online. I hate that sort of thing. I really don't like it. But she said, you laugh with your kids a huge amount. So I think maybe that's the thing I held on to, I hope.
It's lovely. A lovely
Gorgeous.
sense of humor is so nice. It's such a playful thing to have. So lovely. And
Thank you.
yeah, no, it is, Mary. And the last
Mm.
question, what is a small joy that you look forward to every day?
This is easy, guys. So, for any parent listening to this, when your kids are young, And and I know you're frantic and it's so hard and you're wishing, 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 and you think I'm just a chauffeur and I'm whatever. Mine are older. So my three kids moved out over the last year. So they've flown the nest, which is lovely, but it's really bittersweet. So my favorite moment of joy in every day is either getting a little voicemail or a video call or even like a WhatsApp voice message. I love them much more than a typed message. It's hearing their voices. Oh my God, that brings me joy. Anything, even if they're only ringing to give out about something or the whatever, but particularly if they've had a good day and they go, oh, whatever, and they just ring to tell me a little something. Oh, that brings me more joy than anything else in the world.
Yeah,
That's
that's so
gorgeous.
lovely.
Oh, it's so important. It's fabulous, Mary. So, if I was to ask you for one final key message, Mary, what would you love everyone to take from this conversation?
Be brave. That's it. And it goes back to that thing. If you want your child to find their inner bravery, you have to find yours. And for parents like me, that doesn't come naturally. We have to find it. And if you can't find it, pretend. Pretend you found it. That whole step back from the child bit. But I honestly think if we want them to become, and we all do, we want them to be strong and resilient and independent. Forget their CAO points and all that in the future. That's actually, when you have kids my age, that's not what you want. You want them to be independent, resilient, happy, confident, good self esteem. And they won't always be happy, but the self esteem and the resilience, all that stuff is what you really want. But in order to do that, we have to be brave. We have to give them that little bit of autonomy, that bit of freedom. So, yeah, if you want them to find their inner brave, try and find yours. And also keep them off the phones, the
Yeah.
smartphones, as long as you can. That's the second one.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mary. That was a
Mary,
wonderful conversation. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It was a privilege. Absolutely, really enjoyed that.
It's such a pleasure, guys.
We are so grateful to Mary for giving her time to speak to us, and we hope that you enjoyed that episode as much as we did. So much of what Mary had to say about the use of smartphones, the rise in anxiety in our teenagers, and the decline in play is just invaluable, and we hope that you take some inspiration from this episode. As always, if you did enjoy it, share it with others, and like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.